let's reflect now on the return of the South African delegation from the Freedom Flotilla, a humanitarian mission bound for Gaza that drew global attention. Now back home, they share their experiences, the challenges they faced, and what their journey means for South Africa's role in global humanitarian rights advocacy. Joining me now are Inkosi Mandla Mandela, who was on board the flotilla, Basheera Soomar, the international organizer, part of the Freedom Flotilla organizers, as well as Reverend Frank Chikane, offering his perspectives as well, from a historical as well as faith, justice and solidarity perspectives. Good afternoon and thank you for your time. I suppose, let me start with you, Inkosi Mandela. Just your reflections. You were the center of focus, at least from our perspective, the face of the Sumud Flotilla and what became of it, the interception thereof and the conditions that ensued afterwards. Just talk to me about why it was important for you to take part in that flotilla project.
Thank you, Bo Melan, and good afternoon to everyone. First and foremost, we must state that it was never about us as the participants of the global Sumud Flotilla. It has always been about the Palestinians in Gaza and the challenges that they face from the apartheid state of Israel's genocide, that we have continuously said and witnessed the daily atrocities that have been meted out against the Palestinians. So for us as the global Sumud Flotilla, we were coming together as participants from all corners of the world to ensure that we embark on a humanitarian mission, a non-violent mission that is sought to break the blockade and end the illegal siege on Gaza, enabling the much-needed humanitarian aid to get to the Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah.
But for me personally, this has been about legacy and also about our heritage as a family and as South Africa. Being very clear that my great-grandfather, Inkosi Mandla Mandela, was stripped of his chieftaincy, robbed of his land, as well as his cattle stolen by a settler colonialist magistrate who removed him from his chieftaincy for resisting to acknowledge foreign rule in Tembuland. And in this regard, we as a family and the people of Mvezo were moved when we were invited to participate in the global Sumud Flotilla. But also as South Africans role has been born out of resistance. I often talk about the Battle of Salt River, where the Khoi and the San refused for the Portuguese delegation led by Francois Almeida to settle in the Cape in 1510. But also acknowledging that we have been a continent as Africa that has been robbed of its land through the Berlin Conference, which forced borders onto our continent for the beneficiaries of 7 countries in Europe.
Yeah.
But also the South African brand also was passed upon us by the Westminster, which was enacted into law in September 1909, forcing us as a country to send a delegation led by Dr. Khubusana of the President of the South African Native Congress, but also Dr. Abdurrahman of APO. And this delegation rejected South Africa being enacted and passed into law.
Yeah.
But in 1910, it became so, and South Africa was born as a country and a state of a white supremacist rule.
Right.
And this was important for us as South Africans to move from the southern tip of Africa to join the global Sumud Flotilla at the northern tip of Africa, that being Tunisia.
Right.
Particularly a country that we have a relationship with because it was our struggle icon, President Nelson Mandela that had embarked to Tunisia on the 27th of February 1962, ensuring that he could mobilize international solidarity for us.
So let me bring in Basheera Soomar into this conversation. Basheera, from the Freedom Flotilla movement, there have been quite a few of these kinds of flotillas, and none of them reaching Gaza as intended. This one was known as the Global Sumud Flotilla. How does it fit in with that strategy? And what is the strategy? What is the aim and intention? Does it matter whether these boats, these ships, reach the coast of Gaza or not?
Yes, thank you. Of course it matters. And the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, along with other organizations, have been sending boats to Gaza since 2008. And actually, the first few boats that went in 2008 made it to the shores of Gaza, and that was the only ever attempt that was successful to make it to the shore. Since then, there have been multiple attempts, including the women's boat in 2016 that also had one of our South Africans on board. But since 2008, none of the boats were successful. They got closer and closer. The Madeleine and Handela got quite close this year, but unfortunately, they've always all been intercepted. We were hopeful with the Global Sumud Flotilla that because of the volume of boats, maybe not all of them would have gotten to the Gaza shore, but we were definitely hopeful that some of them would have gotten to. Of course, that wasn't the case, and our objectives of delivering humanitarian aid and opening up a permanent humanitarian corridor weren't necessarily achieved, but that doesn't mean, that we weren't successful in our endeavors of building a global model movement to continuously try and break the siege.
Yeah, and Reverend Chikane, just tell me what this movement represents for you. There's a lot of reflection in this country about South Africans who participated in it. I saw quite a great deal of chatter on social media. What does a moment like this and a movement like this that insists that I will go, I will not wait for someone else to go and perhaps raise my activism on social media and be content in perhaps petitioning as best as I can from where I sit, that there are South Africans who say, I will go and be part of the global movement that tries to get to Gaza?
Yeah. Let me just say that, we must really really say to the people who went there, they are really brave, and they represented South Africa that we know. Inkosi Mandela and the rest of the delegation made us proud. The point is, you cannot allow a genocide to happen in Gaza and do nothing. In terms of the Genocide Convention, it has to be prevented. And the strange thing is that the world, the countries which actually adopted that genocide convention, are the ones that are supporting Israel to actually pursue this genocide. And that it had to be civil society individuals who commit themselves to doing this themselves. It should have been governments, by the way. It should have been governments who moved their ships to blockade Israel, stop it from brutalizing people, killing children, starving them, bombing hospitals, etc. That has to be brought to an end. And I think what these colleagues have done is to say, because governments are failing, we're going to do it. And this particular effort had a lot of impact, mobilized people internationally. And I think people internationally are beginning to see Israel for what it is, a genocidal state that is oppressing people who have no rights since 1948. And those people must be let free so that they can govern themselves and live in a free country. That's what we are looking for. Yeah.
Reverend Chikane, let me stick with you for a moment. Locate this within the context of the last few months. it seems to me a lot has shifted internationally in the last few months, with some of the work being done, for instance, by the International Commission of Inquiry that reported just recently, but also the number of countries that were putting on and piling on the pressure on Israel to say the conditions in Gaza better change or else. And you started hearing this talk of countries that a couple of years ago you would not have imagined to be that willing to recognize a Palestinian state. What's happening in this moment?
Well, let me express my view. There are two things that are happening, really. Firstly is that the pressure that the people are putting on the governments is becoming unmanageable for them. I think we must campaign for sanctions, arms embargo, sports boycotts. We must do what we did against the apartheid system, and it's beginning to show results. But there is something else that happened as well. Israel became so brutal, so obvious. It's like genocide. Even those who support them are embarrassed. And some of these states are taking the position they are taking because they can't sustain the position of supporting Israel with arms. Yeah. Can I continue to say that they can't sustain it? I'm worried that it's not yet genuine, because if it's genuine, the British will stop arms supply to Israel, or the French, or the Germans. And I think we need to push harder and make sure that this aberration of a state that ignores all international law and violates all international law, including intercepting flotilla boats in international space, and nobody actually raises a voice against it. We need to make sure Israel does not work outside the law. And at present, they are working outside the law. I must say that I'm now convinced if the apartheid system was allowed to work outside the law, would have ended up with a genocide in South Africa.
Yeah. Basheera, let me come to you before I come to Inkosi Mandela to reflect on that moment of interception and then what transpires after the interception. We've been reporting consistently that the interception happened in international waters. The sense I got just reading up on the global Sumud Flotilla was that seemed to be a different strategy in organizing and preparation. I understand that there were certain specialists that were on board some of these ships, some of these boats, just to almost preempt some of the international law problems that may arise. Tell me about that strategy, as well as the assertion that this interception was unlawful because it happened in international waters.
Yes, this interception and all previous interceptions have always happened in international waters. We had a legal observer boat and we had legal specialists in the flotilla to document these violations specifically. But just to say that even if we moved further into territorial waters, that would be Gaza's waters, it wouldn't be Israel's waters. So we would not be doing anything illegal even if we moved into territorial waters. And I think that's important to say that those waters are Palestinian waters, not Israeli waters.
Yeah. Because Mandela, talk to me about the moment of interception and what it represented for you. Because we saw that video that you put out and talking about how you've basically been captured by Israel. How did it play itself out, and what did it reveal for you about the conditions at the end destination where you wanted to get to, as well as the conditions where you were kept?
Well, for one, let me clarify that we have had 39 missions as the flotilla. Ours was the 38th, and you would know that recently we've also had our comrades in the 1000 Medellin that have also been intercepted, making 39, of which 5 of them have been successful in delivering aid into Gaza. But ours was clear that we would either be able to deliver the humanitarian aid or we would be intercepted. We were intercepted on international waters, which is a violation of international law and maritime law, including our human rights. Always known that Israel has acted with impunity, attacking and bombing and killing sovereign states. They've been to Lebanon, Iran, Syria, Yemen. We also, as the global Sumud Flotilla, were bombed in Tunisia on sovereign grounds. So this all needs to be taken into account when we are speaking about the legality and the violation of international law. But when we were intercepted, we had seen them on the previous night where they tried to formulate a strategy as to how we would be intercepted. They came to isolate the boat I was on, Alma boat, which they were able to do their trial run and effectively were able to isolate our boat. So we knew very well how they would come on the following day in terms of isolating each boat and intercepting it. But having done that, we were taken over 24 hours to Ashdod, where we were brought onto the platform. But many of us were very clear from the on-go when we arrived at Ashdod that there will be no justice on stolen land. So we read it for ourselves to be stripped of our dignity and our humanitarian rights. And this was a real violation and dehumanization of us as activists. We were tied with cable ties on our back and put on the platform. I was on that platform from probably about 10 o'clock. There were some comrades that had been there as early as 7 o'clock. We stayed there up until 4 in the morning in those conditions.
All right. I've got to leave it there. I've got to thank all of you for having joined this conversation this afternoon. That's Inkosi Mandla Mandela, who was on board the global Sumud Flotilla, as well as Basheera Soomar, part of the organizers internationally of the Freedom Flotilla movement, and of course, Reverend Frank Chikane, who joined in the conversation as well.